Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our series of Lunch with the Friends live video presentations on topics of interest to people who love the Boundary Waters. I'm Chris Knopp, the Executive Director of Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. And for over 40 years, Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness has been the leader in protecting the boundary waters. And we've been the leader because of you. All the thousands of individuals who are passionate about the boundary waters are the strength of our organization. I also want to recognize that Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness operates in an ecosystem of many other nonprofit organizations and other entities that are dedicated to protecting the boundary waters and our environment. They include the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, Water Legacy, the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, Sierra Club, Northeastern Minnesota to the Wilderness, the Wilderness Society, Isaac Walton League, Center for Biological Diversity, and many, many more. It is through this ecosystem of organizations and entities that we are able to better protect our environment. And today, the work of Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness focuses on three areas: wilderness, people, and community. For the wilderness, there are two mines and one threat to the boundary waters. Those two mines are twin metals and polymet. And the threat is acid mine drainage from sulfide mining. And today we are fighting these mines through legislation, through litigation, and through community action. And the topic of today's presentation, Twin Metals mine plan to pollute, is part of our effort to stop those mines here. And I have in my hand here the comments that we submitted earlier this week on Twin Metals plan to pollute here. For people, through our No Boundaries to the Boundary Waters program, we are connecting young people of all backgrounds to the boundary waters through classroom education and now online programs and scholarships for wilderness canoe trips. We also want to encourage people to experience the boundary waters. And we have put together materials, including what I have in my hand here, this guidebook put together by our communication director, Pete Marshall, to the boundary waters. And Pete will probably criticize me afterwards, but contact us for your free copy of this. So please do this. It's a great guide. There's still a lot of wonderful paddling in the fall, so please contact us for your free copy of this guide to the boundary waters. And through community, we recognize that we recognize that that the communities that are gateways to the boundary waters, Ely, Grand Marais, and the others, have a shared fate with the wilderness itself, that in order for us to protect the wilderness, these communities must thrive. And we also recognize that people come together in community, and the community of people that support the boundary waters typically come together at our annual gathering that we hold in the fall here. Because of COVID-19, we are not having an in-person annual gathering, but we'll have a virtual annual gathering that you can attend for free. And from September 15th through 17th, we'll have a series of live presentations for people who love the boundary waters. So check out our website for that. We want to keep this community of people who love the boundary waters together. Our program today is a great one, and we have great presenters. Our program is about Twin Metals plan to pollute. Dr. Stephen Emmerman and Dr. Amy Mirbeau are our two presenters. Stephen Emmerman is an international expert with decades of experience on addressing the threats from mining. Amy Mirbeau is an expert on sulfate pollution and was the principal investigator looking at Minnesota's sulfate water quality standard here today. Before I turn it over to them, there are a couple housekeeping matters here. At the bottom of your screen there, you'll see a question and answer tab. Please answer, during the course of the presentation, ask questions that you have, and our policy director, Scott Beauchamp, and myself will try to answer those throughout. There's also a chat button at the bottom as well, and we'll try to respond to your comments throughout this as well here. And Pete Marshall, our communication director, is live streaming this for all the people that are watching this on Facebook. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Stephen Emmerman and Dr. Amy Mirbeau. Thank you again for joining us.
Here we go. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day for this presentation. I am Stephen Emmerman. I'll be presenting with Dr. Amy Mirbeau. We're going to be evaluating the mining plan of operations for the proposed Twin Metals mine. This presentation is entitled Twin Metals Plan to Pollute. Now, we chose this title very deliberately in that we see the pollution of the boundary waters as an integral part of this plan. And I will be explaining that shortly. Okay, if you're not from this area, this map should help out. Boundary waters is in farthest northeastern tip of Minnesota. The proposed mining project, which you see in red, is only a couple of miles upstream from the boundary waters canoe area wilderness. And those blue arrows show a potential path of transport of contaminants up north through Minnesota and then into Canada. Okay, so first to summarize the mine plan of operations, and that's the name of the document, Mine Plan of Operations. This was a plan to mine a sulfide ore body. The sulfide ore mining is something new to Minnesota, never been done before in Minnesota. Why that matters, we'll be talking about later. The minerals of interest are copper and nickel, also cobalt and platinum group elements. The plan is to process 20,000 tons of ore per day, and this mining project will go on for 25 years of production. Okay, now, how much of this ore body is actually mineral or metal? Copper grade is 0.69%, nickel grade is 0.22%, cobalt grade 110 parts per million, platinum grade 0.19 parts per million. We see that only about 1% of this ore body is actually some metal of economic value. The rest of the ore body will be waste rock. By the end of this mining project, there will be 211 million tons of waste rock and tailings. Just for clarity, waste rock refers to the rock, the overburden that must be removed to reach the ore body. Tailings are the crushed ore body that remain after processing of the ore. So this plan was evaluated by a team of experts that was organized by Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness, experts in economic geology, hydrology, mine waste management, water quality, aquatic biology, and one of the world experts on wild rice, who you'll be hearing from shortly. Okay, so these are today's presenters. I am Dr. Stephen Emmerman. I have a master's in geophysics from Princeton and PhD in geophysics from Cornell. I was a professor of hydrology for 31 years. Now I'm a retired professor and do full-time mining consulting. I've evaluated mining projects on all continents except Antarctica. I've testified before the U.S. House of Representatives on mining issues. Dr. Amy Mirbeau has a PhD in geology from University of Minnesota. She was the principal investigator on a Minnesota study that evaluated the sulfate water quality study for protection of wild rice. Dr. Mirbeau was a scientist at the St. Croix Watershed Research Center of the Science Museum of Minneapolis. Okay, so first, an overall summary of the mine plan of operations. There's a lack of detail in the plans. There's entire topics of concern that were not addressed at all. There's no contingency plans, and there's no consideration of options or justification for choices. Now, I want to emphasize these last two deficiencies. Contingency plans and options are the very heart of any major mining project. First of all, contingency plans. Any mining project operates by what is called the observational method. It means that the project is so complex that not all actions can be planned out in advance. Instead, there's a set of pre-planned actions called contingency plans, and as observations are made, as the project proceeds, choices will be made among these pre-planned actions. Now, it doesn't do any good to make observations if you don't have any actions planned to respond to those observations. And it's quite unusual to have no contingency plans whatsoever at this stage of planning for a project. Okay? Consideration of options. The next step after a mine plan of operations would be the environmental impact study. And the heart of an environmental impact study is a consideration of alternatives, options, maybe 6 alternatives, pros and cons, the different alternatives, finally deciding on a preferred alternative. But the alternatives, the options, are real options. They're not simply created for the purpose of doing the environmental impact study. So this is quite unusual to have no options or alternatives on the table at this point in the planning. Various succinct descriptions that came up in the course of the work of the team of experts. It's been called a plan to make a plan. It's been called a statement of intentions. It's been called a wish list. It's been called fairy tale. Okay, so these are the topics for today's presentation. There's no dam to contain the surface pile of mine waste. There's no water treatment facility. There's an intention to endlessly recycle water within the mining operation. There's a dismissal of any possibility of acid mine drainage. There's no consideration of the impact of sulfate on wild rice, water quality, or mercury in fish. There's no consideration of any impact on bird migration along the Mississippi Flyway. Okay, now these are some claims from Twin Metals, and I am not mocking Twin Metals. These are actual quotes on the left. Tailings stored in dry stacks are piles of sand topped by native soil and vegetation. There is no need for a dam to hold them in place, no possibility of dam failure, and no long-term storage issues. So they're not going to build a dam, so we don't have to worry about the dam failing. And it sounds to me a lot like we're not going to put brakes on the trucks, so no need to worry about the brakes failing. Next quote, water reuse practices. Preliminary modeling indicates a wastewater treatment plant would not be needed on site. So no need for any wastewater treatment. We're so confident that there's going to be no release of wastewater. We'll have no plan to treat that wastewater. And it sounds to me a lot like our facility is so fireproof, we're not going to worry about fire extinguishers. And finally, no discharge for contact/process water. Okay, meaning all water will be endlessly recycled, no discharge of water. And it sounds to me a lot like our sinks won't need drains because we're going to endlessly recycle the same wash water. So let's think about all of these issues some more. Excuse me. First point, dry stack is not the standard terminology. The standard terminology is filtered tailings, okay? That is, the tailings are not literally dry, they'll be filtered. Filtered tailings have less than 25% water content, and they behave like a moist soil. Now, the advantage of filtered tailings is that they have just the right water content that they can be properly compacted in the tailings storage facility. If they were literally dry, they'd be like dust and you couldn't compact them. Okay, so Twin Metals will not use that word dam. And this is not simply a matter of semantics. Well, what happens if you don't use the word dam? If you don't have a dam, well, fine, you still have a 130-foot high pile of 107 million tons of toxic mine tailings. Now, Twin Metals says the water content will be an average 14.5%. So this pile will include over 15 million tons of toxic water that's not exactly dry. Okay, so if you don't use the word dam, what does that mean? Does that mean you're exempt from all dam safety regulations? Does that mean you're exempt from any consideration of the design criteria for the dam? That is the inflow design flood, the design earthquake, and many, many other regulations that govern how dams can be constructed? I still cannot get over this idea The Twin Metals won't use that word dam. They say no dam is necessary. If you don't use the word dam, does that mean you're exempt from considering the consequences of dam failure? But I can tell you the consequences. The consequences will be the release of 107 million tons of toxic tailings in New Birch Lake. Okay, so here's the edge of their so-called dry stack facility, actually filter tailings. Here's Birch Lake. The closest approach is about 600 feet. Now, a 130-foot pile can fail simply by slumping, and it can easily slump 10 times its height. That is, this pile can easily slump for 1,300 feet, which will carry the tailings well into Birch Lake. Now, the other concept, zero discharge, no water released from the mining project. Now, the assumption is the input of water will equal the consumption of water, so no need to release water. So what are the inputs of water? There's groundwater flowing into the underground mine. Twin Metals has estimated that at 53,000 gallons per hour. There's precipitation and surface runoff and snowmelt onto the project site. There's been no estimate of this number. If we look at consumption of water, there's evaporation. There's been no estimate. There's the storage of water in the filter tailings. I've estimated that at 16,800 gallons per hour. There's the storage of water in the exported concentrates. There's been no estimate of that. The plan is that Twin Metals will withdraw more or less water from Birch Lake as they need to make the inputs and consumption of water balance. But the real question is, what happens if the input of water exceeds the consumption? That is, what if it rains a lot or a lot of snow melts? What happens then? Well, this is the plan. Twin Metals will have storage ponds to hold excess water. Look at the right. The processed water pond would be sized to contain the direct precipitation from the 100-year 24-hour storm event. On the left, the contact water ponds would be sized to contain a 100-year 24-hour storm event. The collective storage capacity of the contact water ponds for the lined dry stack facility during operation would be sized to meet the stormwater runoff requirements from a 100-year snowpack. So what does this mean, a 100-year storm? It means a storm that in any given year has a 1% probability of occurring or being exceeded. That is, in any given year, there's a 1% probability that these storage ponds will overflow and they will release untreated mine water into the environment. Now, if the probability is 1% every year, it's 20% over 25 years. Now, this is not just me looking at a mining project and saying there's a 22% probability of overflow of the storage ponds and release of untreated water into the environment. This is the design of Twin Metals, that this will be the probability. This is why we call this a plan to pollute. Now, so the project includes filter tailings, zero water treatment, and zero water discharge. And we could ask, are these concepts even compatible? If you have this processed water and you keep recycling it again and again and again, eventually it becomes saturated with all soluble salts from the ore and reagents. It's filled with salt. It can't hold any more salt. Okay, so what happens when the tailings and this saturated water enter the filter presses? What keeps the salts from continuously precipitating in and clogging the pores of the filter plates? And what are you going to wash the filter plates with? The same water that's already saturated in salts? That is, how do the filter presses even keep working once the processed water has become saturated and there's no water treatment to clean the processed water? And finally, does the processed water even work for ore processing if it is saturated with salts? Okay, now I did not make up these questions. I attended Society for Mining, Metallurgy, and Exploration in Phoenix on February 26th of this year. And all of these questions were posed to a panel of experts on filter tailings. One of those panelists was Glenn Barr, that is the Vice President for Engineering for Twin Metals. And this would have been the perfect opportunity for Mr. Barr to explain to mining industry experts that Twin Metals has this all figured out. And he actually said nothing during that discussion. Okay, now finally, the significance of this sulfide ore body. As I said, this is something new to Minnesota. This is very different from the iron mining that has been traditional in Minnesota for many decades. Okay, now when sulfide minerals are brought to the surface as tailings or waste rock, they're crushed and they're exposed to air and water. The sulfide minerals will transform into sulfuric acid. And while they do that, they will release any heavy metals that were part of the sulfide crystalline structure. This is called acid mine drainage. This is a global phenomenon connected with sulfide mining. It has no simple solution. The problem here is that Twin Metals has dismissed any possibility of acid mine drainage. On the left, this is my photo. This is acid mine drainage from the Moto Odo mine in Minas Gerais in Brazil. A few miles downstream from that mine is a village, Santa Rita, and the water in the wells, exactly the same color. Now, when we say sulfuric acid, it means the exact same thing as sulfate in water. And Dr. Mirabo will then take on this discussion about significance of sulfate.
Thank you, Dr. Emmerman. Excuse me. And thanks everybody for tuning in today. So as Steve mentioned, acid mine drainage, or AMD, is all about sulfur chemistry. However, even if that acidity might be able to be temporarily controlled, there are three other main dangers that I think are really major about discharge of sulfate to the very pristine, low sulfate, fresh waters of northeastern Minnesota. And those are here, and I'll walk through each one of them. So the first problem is that sulfate pollution could wipe out populations of wild rice and of other rooted plants. Wild rice, of course, monomen or psin, is Minnesota state grain. It has incredible cultural significance to a lot of Native American people. And it's great food, as we know. It's also great habitat for birds and for fish. And sulfate pollution could potentially wipe out those populations of wild rice and other rooted plants. Sulfate pollution could also cause nuisance algae blooms because sulfate pollution increases the nutrients that feed algae blooms. And so these algae blooms could be the kind that turn the water green and a lot less transparent, or could even be harmful algal blooms, the type that when animals drink the water, they become sick or die. The third danger is that sulfate pollution could increase the amount of mercury in fish that are eaten by humans, are eaten by predatory animals such as loons, eagles, otters, ospreys, minks. And so I will walk you through this process because it's complicated chemistry. I apologize, it just is. And because I think that the dangers of sulfate are often underappreciated by environmental managers and by regulatory agencies. So next slide, please. Okay. So I apologize for all the text on these slides. I wanted to make sure that it's here for those of you who want to review the slides and see what you might have missed the first time around. So what we have on the left is a little diagram showing a cross-section of a lake of northern Minnesota. So we have the sky blue water on top and the brown, flocculent, gooey, wet mud down below. And there's a plant that's rooted in the mud. This could be wild rice, or this could be any of the other rooted plants that you see around the fringes of lakes in the boundary waters. And again, these provide really important habitat for wildlife. Down in the sediments, you see some phosphorus. Oh, sorry, I should go in order here. That organic matter at the bottoms of lakes is in the mud. So the mud at the bottoms of lakes contains lots of organic matter. Organic matter is when this plant dies and sinks to the bottom of the lake, when algae die and sink to the bottom of the lake or are eaten by zooplankton, which are eaten by fish, and when those critters sink to the bottom of the lake, those are organic matter and become part of that mud. Organic matter is mostly made up of carbon, but there are smaller amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus and other elements. Nitrogen and phosphorus are nutrients that the plants take up in order to grow. The mercury that's shown here falls from the atmosphere. That's why it's here. Mercury gets into the atmosphere from different types of mining, from coal burning, and gets way up into the atmosphere, circles the globe. So even if we don't have a coal burning power plant right nearby, we still get mercury because it is deposited everywhere in the world. But when that mercury falls into a lake, it has a real affinity for that organic matter. So it sticks tightly to the organic matter. So what we have here is three pretty reactive chemicals. Under natural conditions, these chemicals will stay buried in the mud of lakes of northeastern Minnesota, and that's because there's no oxygen present. The oxygen is needed to decompose this organic matter, and since there isn't any, these chemicals stay socked away, or what we say sequestered, and that's what we want. Okay, next slide, please. And so what happens if we start putting sulfate into this low sulfate, very freshwater system? It turns out that there are some microbes, bacteria, that breathe sulfate the same way that other organisms breathe oxygen. And when sulfate is added to the lake water, these microbes are stimulated and start to grow and reproduce and do their thing. And the thing that they do is they convert sulfate into sulfide. Sulfide is that rotten egg smell that you might have smelled walking around swamps in certain parts of the lake, certain parts of the state, or maybe along the coasts near the ocean. And sulfide is toxic to multicellular organisms. It can be directly toxic to plants that are rooted in the mud. In the case of wild rice, we know from experiments that were conducted at University of Minnesota Duluth that sulfide reduces the survival of the seedlings. It reduces the growth of the plant. And when the plant is ready to start making seeds, it makes fewer seeds and the seeds are lighter in weight. So that next generation of wild rice that grows from the seeds the next season, there will be fewer plants and those plants won't have as much of a chance to grow and get up to the surface of the lake. The other effect is that the roots of the plants, as you can see shown here, turn black. And this is something that we've seen both in experimental results and in lakes where wild rice is being subjected to sulfide poisoning at this time. So that's the first danger, is introducing a toxic substance into the mud. Okay, next slide, please. So the second danger is that these same microbes, in order to convert that sulfate into sulfide, they need to break down organic matter. You can think about this a little bit like we use the oxygen that we breathe to break down the food that we eat and get stuff out of it, get those nutrients out of it. These microbes use the sulfate that they breathe to break down organic matter, and the nutrients and everything else comes out. So that includes that phosphorus and nitrogen, the nutrients. It also includes that mercury, which was stuck to the organic matter. The nitrogen and phosphorus cause excess algae growth by feeding the algae, so nutrients that are there that were not there before. And the mercury, I will talk about another process in a minute, that mercury can be methylated and enter the food web. So not only, when you add sulfate, not only do you have the mercury raining down from the atmosphere, but you have mercury coming up out of the sediments too. Okay, next slide, please. And as it turns out, those same microbes that use sulfate, that convert sulfate to sulfide and break down organic matter, also stick a molecule onto mercury and make it into methylmercury. And that is the only kind of mercury that enters the food chain. So I call this kind of the mercury double whammy. Not only do we have more mercury, but more of that mercury is going to be able to enter the food chain. And again, eating contaminated fish, it can cause mercury poisoning. We have consumption advisories for children, for how many fish you can eat per month, for children, for women who are pregnant or may become pregnant. But consumption advisories don't work for people who depend upon fish, and they certainly don't work for loons, eagles, otters, and other critters. And the effects of mercury can be quite devastating because they affect reproduction, they affect behavior, and the ability of critters to do what they need to do. Okay, next slide. And so to summarize, under natural conditions, plant nutrients and mercury mostly stay in the mud, and that's where we want them. When ecosystems, when these lakes are polluted with sulfate, those sulfate molecules penetrate the mud. There, they are converted into toxic sulfide, which increases the release of phosphorus, nitrogen, and mercury, and enhances the methylation of mercury. And there are two more points that I want to make about this slide. One is that this purple and yellow arrow, Vikings colors, sorry, goes both ways, right? It doesn't just go from sulfate to sulfide, but that sulfide can be converted back to sulfate, and then the microbes can convert it back to sulfide and go on and on like this, almost in an unlimited way. Every time that sulfate gets converted to sulfide, more of these other two processes, number 2 and 3 processes, occur. But when the sulfide gets converted back to sulfate, those other processes are not reversible. So a single atom of sulfate, of sulfur, could actually go through this process many times and just build up more and more and more phosphorus, nitrogen, mercury, and methylmercury. The other point is that sulfate isn't just in water. So it's not just water flow downstream, but dust can have a lot of sulfur in it. And so the danger is actually to the entire region, because dust deposition from the mine could pollute lakes that are not directly downstream of the proposed mine. Okay, next slide, please. And then I just wanted to say a couple words about the Mississippi Flyway. So the map on your left is showing the 4 north-south routes that migrating birds take in North America. The Mississippi Flyway is shown in blue, and it actually accommodates nearly half of all migrating birds every year, twice a year, of course. About 300 species of birds or more use this pathway to migrate from winter home to summer home. It's about 40% of all waterfowl, including ducks, and also that the flyway is used by pretty much every bird that you ever have seen at your feeders. And this, to me, really shows how northern Minnesota's ecosystems are so unique, but that they also contribute tremendously to global conservation and environmental health. And you can see the outline of Minnesota there. The proposed mine is, of course, smack dab in the middle of this flyway. So if the mine were built, it would cause light pollution, noise pollution, other kinds of pollution, habitat destruction and degradation, and migrating birds, migrating water birds, would use the ponds full of this contaminated, salty, untreated mine waste while they were flying through, and could become ill or die. Okay, next slide. And then just summarizing the points that Steve and I have talked to you about, and remember that these are not all of the things that we found, that our team found are lacking and really concerning in the Twin Metals plan. So first, there's no dam proposed to hold back a 130-foot tall pile of moist soil, which is going to get rained on and snowed on. There's no water treatment facility proposed, which means that untreated, contaminated mine waste will be sitting in holding ponds that are themselves under-engineered. Remember, as Steve mentioned, there is a 22% chance of spilling this waste into the environment during the 25 years of the proposed mine. Twin Metals proposes to endlessly use the same water, which simply doesn't work. It means also that there will be super salty water in these holding ponds. Twin Metals dismisses the possibility of acid mine drainage, where they really do not have the data to back up that claim. Even if the acidity were controlled for a short period, there would be major sulfate impacts, as I described, on wild rice and other important plants, on water quality and algae growth in the boundary waters and elsewhere, and in mercury in fish that people and predators depend upon. And it would disrupt a major bird migration route through Minnesota. So I think that's all we have. I'm going to throw it back over to Chris and really look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy and Steve, for that great presentation. I want, before we get to questions here, a couple things. Again, our virtual annual gathering is this September 15th through 17th, Tuesday through Thursday. And we have a series of live programs airing at 12 noon, just like this Lunch with the Friends presentation, and then in the evening at 7 p.m. So please go to our website and sign up for these free programs that will help us build the community of people who love the boundary waters. And Steve, if you would move the slide forward to the next slide here. Here's our call to action for this presentation, and there's two parts to it. If you would contact Governor Walz and DNR Commissioner Sarah Stroman and tell them that Twin Metals is the wrong mine at the wrong place. There's the contact information on your screen right now for Governor Walz and Commissioner Stroman. In addition, at the federal level, if you would also contact U.S. Senators Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith and tell them to sponsor Congresswoman Betty McCollum's bill, H.R. 5598 in the Senate. Congresswoman Betty McCollum's bill would stop Twin Metals from polluting the boundary waters. And there you have the contact information for Senators Klobuchar and Senator Smith. So please take those actions at both the state and federal levels to protect the boundary waters from Twin Metals here. And Dr. Emmerman, I want to go back to this, when is a dam not a dam here? So what we have here is a 130-foot pile, and that has to hold back water in order to maintain its integrity. Would you speak about the whole misuse of language and the misleading nature of Twin Metals by saying there's not a dam required here?
Okay, yeah, that's an excellent question. Okay, so let me say a little bit more about that. So the idea behind filter tailings, you run the tailings through filter presses, and typical target is to get the tailings down to about 15% water content. Okay, and that's a good water content because it's a good water content for them compacting the tailings in the tailings facility. Okay, Twin Metals says that they will achieve 13 to 16% water content. That is going somewhat beyond current technology. Now, but even so, with the current technology, it's quite difficult to even achieve a target of 15%. Okay, now where am I getting this information from? This is right off the website of SRK Consulting, and they're the consultants for the Twin Metals project, at least for the filter tailings facility. Okay, so I'm getting this information right out of the source. Okay, with current technology, 15% is the target. 17 to 18% is quite common when everything's running on spec. When it's off spec, maybe 22, 23, 25%. Okay, and a lot of that is just based upon the heterogeneity of the ore body. Okay, very difficult to control the water content as the tailings leave the filter presses. Okay, now the other issue in northern Minnesota is even if the tailings leave the filter presses with the right water content, they can get rained on, of course, and then they can be too wet for compaction. So the procedure, which is standard in the mining industry, is the tailings that are too wet for compaction, you put those in the middle of the tailings facility. The tailings that have the right water content go on the perimeter and you compact them. Okay, that creates what's called a structural zone on the perimeter. of compacted tailings. Now, this structural zone is a dam, okay? That is, it serves the exact same function of a dam. It prevents the flow of water and waste material. Okay, so that's a dam. My concern is when Twin Metals says, no, we don't have a dam, we don't need a dam, we'll have a structural zone. Well, it seems like a way to get out of dam safety regulations, okay? And that's what I'm having problems with, okay? And I was quite surprised when the DNR submitted their comments. They said, no, what you're talking about is a dam and needs to meet dam safety regulations. And Twin Metals came back and doubled down and said, no, we don't need a dam. Okay, so I'm having trouble with this whole discussion. Okay?
So a structure that is designed to hold back water, this structural zone is a dam. That's what a dam is, to hold back water.
That's what a dam is. That's how a dam is defined in Minnesota law. Okay, standard in the mining industry. A tailings dam is a structure that restrains water or tailings. Okay, so yes, a structural zone is a type of dam.
Great, thank you, Steve. And Amy here. So, talk a little bit more about the problem that sulfate pollution causes with respect to mercury, and how that mercury is mobilized into the environment with sulfate present.
Yeah. So, the same microbes that do the sulfate conversion to sulfide have a process, and there are other microbes that do it too, but these are of a lot of concern, is that they stick a methyl group, they stick a organic molecule onto the mercury, and then that mercury can enter the food chain. So it can be attached to algae, and then it gets eaten by zooplankton, eaten by little fish, bigger fish, and at every stage, that the quantity of mercury gets bigger. So at the level of, say, this is why people say to eat smaller fish, because they haven't eaten as many mercury-containing fish, and not to eat sport fish, but to eat panfish. Because of the fat in the fish is distributed differently and does not accumulate as much in panfish. And then then those fish get eaten by critters higher up the food chain. And so this is it's a really well known process. The more sulfate conversion to sulfide, the more methyl mercury in our lakes. If that answered your question.
Yeah. So what we have here is elemental mercury gets mobilized as methyl mercury in the water, and it goes up the food chain. And what are the health effects from mercury contamination on people?
They can be cognitive disruption, developmental disruption, especially in children, behavioral problems. There can be major reproductive issues, both in humans and in other in mammals and birds as well. It can cause loons to not be able to reproduce. It can cause otters to have deficient behaviors so that they can't survive.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have another question that gets at how copper-sulfide mining is different from iron ore or taconite mining here. And so the question pertains to why don't you have acid mine drainage with traditional taconite mining?
Oh, okay. I can take this question.
Okay.
Okay. It's a difference in the ore body. Okay. Often an iron ore does not contain any sulfur. Okay, it might, but there's many iron ore bodies are simply iron oxides, and there's no sulfur involved. Okay, so that's the key player here is sulfur. Now, there's also copper ore bodies that don't contain any sulfur, but there's quite a few that do. Okay, so, but this is an ore body that has sulfur in it. Okay. And anytime you have an ore body with sulfur, we say sulfide, okay? Anytime you have sulfide in the ore body, you have that possibility of acid mine drainage and you need to evaluate the possibility, and you need to have a whole range of mechanisms for preventing acid mine drainage, and for monitoring acid mine drainage and for treating the environment if acid mine drainage occurs. Okay? Now, to the best of my knowledge, this will be the first mining of a sulfide ore body in Minnesota. So this is something new to Minnesota. There's many parts of the world where acid mine drainage has been a problem for centuries, Spain especially, okay? It's very well known about acid mine drainage. People can see the yellow and red rivers. In Minnesota, it's not something that's come up before, okay? But I will tell you what is Twin Metals' plan. Their plan is that they recognize there's sulfur in the ore body. Their plan is that 100% of the sulfur will go into the copper concentrate and be shipped off the site, okay? And that's what I have trouble with, is 100%. This is why people have called their plan a wish list, a fairy tale. Okay, what is this 100%? Well, what if it's 99%? What are you going to do about it? How are you going to monitor that? What's your plan? Okay, all of that is missing in the mine plan of operations.
We also have a related question that I could perhaps address. Someone asked a question about the contamination of Birch Lake from what was the LTV Steel's taconite operation at the Dunkel pit. And what happened there is that in the taconite mining for the Dunkel pit, which was contaminated a tributary that fed into Birch Lake, is that the copper sulfide ore body was taken off to get at the taconite, and that pile then leached into that tributary that polluted Bob's Bay in Birch Lake. So here was a way in which taconite mining indirectly by exposing that copper sulfide ore to air and water resulted in that acid mine drainage into Birch Lake that happened as a result of the taconite mining. So I know that question was raised as part of that. There was also another question raised from or another comment here from one of the attendees here. So contacting Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith is very important, because in order for Betty McCollum's bill to pass Congress, it needs a Senate companion bill. And members of the Senate will naturally look at the Minnesota Senators Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith. And if they're not sponsoring that bill in the Senate, then they'll say, hey, why should we stick our necks out and go forward and support this legislation to protect the boundary waters. So that's why having our U.S. senators from Minnesota support a companion bill in the Senate is so important. So please contact Senators Klobuchar and Tina and Smith to support that companion bill here. Steve, I want to get at another question that kind of goes back at this zero discharge of water. So and there are two aspects of it. One is, okay, so this mine operates for 25 years. And so you have a system in place where water in and water out is supposed to work. So what happens when the mine closes?
Okay, so that's a very good question. According to the plan, I'm kind of thinking of plan in quotes right now. According to the plan, at the end of the production of the mine, at the closure of the mine, they will evaluate the need for a water treatment facility. And if they need one, they'll build one. Okay? So once you're no longer consuming water in the mining project, you have to release water. Okay? And so they say after 25 years, we'll decide if we need a water treatment facility. Okay? Fine. The problem is that there also could be a need for a temporary closure of the mine. And this is acknowledged in the mine plan of operations, okay? And the mine plan of operations even says there could be a fall in copper prices. So they cannot economically operate the mine. They might need to close the mine temporarily. And at that point, they will evaluate the need for water treatment facility. And I have trouble with this kind of planning. It was not really planning, okay? I have trouble with this because right now, the economics of the project are such that they don't want to or they can't spend the money for a water treatment facility. Okay, water treatment facility would be a wise backup move, but it's not worth the money. Okay, but now they're telling us that if there's a fall in copper prices and they have to close the mine, for some reason at that point, they're going to have the money they need to build a water treatment facility. And anyway, this is not planning. Okay, so you're right. Eventually, there probably will be need for a water treatment facility, but most mining projects, like as in almost all, build that in from the beginning. Don't just say we'll figure it out later. Okay, once we really need one.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Steve, for that explanation here. And Amy, if you would address the importance of wild rice in native culture and why the contamination of sulfate has these broader implications.
It's tough for me because I am probably not the right person to express this, but from my work with Anishinaabe people and Dakota people, my understanding is that when the people who are the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa in the state, when they came to this land, they started out in the east and received a prophecy that they should go west to a place where food was abundant and food grew on the water. And this place is the Great Lakes region, and the food that grows on the water is wild rice or monomen. In the Dakota, it's psin, and I'm very sorry for any Dakota speakers who I have just butchered the language there. And so wild rice for a lot of Native people is not just a food. It's not just a plant and a habitat, but it's a relative. It's like saying, well, you know, we have to, I don't know, we have to disrupt your family or your sister in order to do this mining, and you know, that's not a big deal. It's just your sister. It's just your grandfather, and so culturally, it's extremely important. And I would really encourage people to read some of the ton of material that's out there on the web. You can start with some of Winona LaDuke's work on beautiful essays on the importance of wild rice to Anishinaabe people and other Native folks.
Great, thank you, Amy. Here, I know we're running short on time. There was a final question and comment from, we have several outstanding here. I want to respect people's times here, but there was an important question that was asked here. But what do we tell the people of northeastern Minnesota about the need for jobs, and what do we say for people that understandably want their communities to thrive? And our response is that the concerns for economic advancement and to have the communities thrive is a legitimate one and an important one, and it's one that it should be of importance not just to us but for everyone in Minnesota. The problem that we have with the proposed Twin Metals mine and the proposed Pollute mine is that about the environmental devastation that those mines would leave and leave those communities in our state worse for all of us. And we believe that the state of Minnesota should develop a Marshall Plan for northeastern Minnesota, just as we are developing plans for the Rochester area to build off the Mayo Clinic in southeastern Minnesota. northeastern Minnesota deserves the same sort of attention to have economic progress for that region, so that we can all prosper in the generations to come. So we believe that the communities that are gateways to the boundary waters should thrive, and that is a legitimate and valid concern, and we should be part of having a solution to have a sustainable future for those communities. And so I want to thank everyone again. Steve, if you would put the slide back to the annual gathering slide there. Again, our annual gathering is coming up in just 2 weeks, September 15th through 17th. Please come and participate in those live video presentations. Sign up for free there. We will try to answer as many questions. I know there are many unanswered ones. We'll try to answer those as we can. So please email us, and we'll try to do our best to respond to your questions. But please come to our annual gathering here. And most of all, please keep your passion for the boundary waters up. Again, you are the strength of our organization, and you are the magic that will help us protect the boundary waters for generations to come. Have a great afternoon. Thank you so much.